Hey, welcome to the Swine Time Podcast here at Pipestone. I'm your host, Spencer Wayne. I'm one of the staff veterinarians here at Pipestone Veterinary Services. I'm also one of the owners of Pipestone Holdings, and I get this kind of cool opportunity every so often to record podcasts with people that I think would be interesting for our producers to listen to. And so today, here in the studio with me and then also remotely are two people that I've known for a while. And the topic we're going to cover today is perspectives on welfare and sustainability. And to address those topics, I've got my go-to experts, and one is Dr. Cara Haden. And she lives east of us quite a ways, and she's phoning in right now, but she is our director of swine welfare. I'm probably saying that wrong, Cara. I apologize. You can identify your role and describe that a little bit better when I turn it over to you. And then the other guest is Dr. Carissa Odland. And Carissa is the Director of Sustainability at Wholestone Farms, the producer-owned packer enterprise that is involved with two plants, Fremont, Nebraska, and Eagle Grove, Iowa. So I'll turn it over to each of you to kind of introduce yourself a little bit, if you would, starting with Cara. Cara, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what your role is, and then we'll go over to Carissa.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Spencer. So, like Spencer said, my name is Cara Haden. I'm the Director of Animal Welfare for the Pipestone Management Company. And so, my job is to protect and promote animal welfare at our sow farms and then in the grow finish sites that we oversee as well. And so, my job has four parts. One is to equip our caregivers with protocols, tools, and training. Number two is to verify an appropriate or very good welfare culture. Three is to investigate welfare concerns and then solve those problems. And then four is to communicate with clients and the public what we're doing from a welfare perspective. So that's me and a little bit of what I do.
All right, Carissa, why don't you go for it?
Yeah, thanks, Spencer. As you said, I'm overseeing the sustainability program for Wholestone Farms. And really, at Wholestone, we take a holistic approach to sustainability. And so, our sustainability program really encompasses both our packing plant as well as on the farms, right? Because we are a producer owned plant. And so, we kind of break our sustainability program up into 6 pillars. We really emphasize the pig, so we would focus on animal welfare. We also obviously incorporate environment into our sustainability pillars. We also look at good employee practices, food safety. We also look at consumer choice, and then finally our community involvement. And so just kind of across those 6 pillars, then I interact both on the farm as well as with our team at our Fremont facility. And then in 2024, we'll be expanding and including our team at Eagle Grove.
Okay. You two were asked to be on this podcast because even though you're doing different things in different places, there is some overlap for this. And it's kind of like, I don't know, everybody listening probably is intuitively going to say, well, yeah, there kind of is, but it's not concrete and direct. It's, how would you lay it up? Part of the sustainability effort would include things like Prop 12, the packer audits that are done regularly. And then part of our welfare would include getting those audits done, managing our Prop 12 farms. I don't know what else. There is an overlap. If you did a Venn diagram, it would kind of overlap in that. So to get into it a little bit, maybe, Cara, would you talk a little bit about, you mentioned just roughly what you're doing, but as far as our programs, and it has to be all program oriented because there's too many farms to look at and do things just kind of piecemeal. You have to do it, viewing the whole enterprise in mind and how we do things consistently across a company. Can you talk about some of the major focus areas that as far as animal welfare goes, that you've made strides on, that you've pushed for?
So I think our animal welfare, so every year we have a different phrase for our welfare program. And so for 2023, the big focus was for our caregivers to understand what you think and what you do matters. And so we talked a lot about interactions with pigs and the fact that we raise pigs inside. And so everything that they have is provided by us. And that means as caregivers, what we do every day is extremely important. So that was 2023. And then right now we're gearing up for 2024. So our phrase of the year for 2024 is giving pigs a good life. And so we're really going to be focusing on what it looks like to be able to tell the public we really feel like we give pigs a good life on our farms. And so to do that, we're focusing on reducing or eliminating negative experiences and providing positive experiences. And we specifically are looking at kind of 4 different buckets. So we're looking at nutrition, interaction, health, and environment, and trying to make sure that those are positive and reduce any negatives so that we can say very confidently, we feel really good that we're giving these pigs a good life. So that's our focus for 2024.
Okay, I like the way you've done that with, I don't know if you call it a slogan or a catchphrase. It's some verbal set of words that you can rally around and say, let's do this and go forward with it. I think about Jim Lowe in Illinois years ago. He was given a talk, and the catchphrase for that was, "Did the pig know you went to work today or showed up for work?" It was kind of the same concept. The pig, you know, you're doing it for the pig. So did that pig know you showed up and did your job today or not? Okay.
Yep.
How does the welfare program push into our efforts with Prop 12? Just, are there special concerns with Prop 12?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that Prop 12, there are some things that are more challenging from a welfare standpoint with Prop 12. And so I know that the regulation was written with the desire to improve animal welfare. And what we see is that there are trade-offs. So yes, in Prop 12, the animals have additional square footage. And so we see that ability to express more natural behaviors and to move around. But the trade-off is that we are housing them in pen gestation. And that means that there are interactions and there's the ability to fight. And so we see a number of negative welfare impacts at our Prop 12 farms. Like one example, our stall barns, we treat about 3.5% of the herd for lameness in a given year. At our Prop 12 barns, it's over 10% of the herd gets treated for injuries from fighting and from lameness. We see higher mortality on our Prop 12 farms, and that's also associated with that lameness. If we look at antimicrobial use and anti-inflammatory use, it is substantially higher at our Prop 12 barns. And so I would say that we are trying to find a balance. What does it look like to promote animal welfare and to understand these trade-offs, and where are areas that we can give up and where are areas that we need to hold our ground? But I would say we don't have Prop 12 figured out perfectly to really improve welfare in some areas.
All right, so I'm going to go over to Carissa now, because it sounds like it's not all bright, sunshiny days with Prop 12. There's some challenges. And so, Carissa, you represent a packer, and that packer is saying, oh, we're going to take Prop 12 pigs in and present them to the marketplaces as an attribute pork that the consumer in a lot of ways would view as better welfare. How does a packing plant, or how does Wholestone Farms, look at this and say, well, maybe so. Maybe there are special challenges, but when you present that to the marketplace, how do you look at handling that product coming in and how you present that to the marketplace in the context of sustainability and the attribute pork?
Yeah, it's a good question, Spencer. I think that the key here is transparency and sharing that as part of the story and not being afraid to tell that piece, right? Exactly to Cara's point that there are trade-offs, right? I was at a conference recently where they talked about something called the trust transformation. And basically what they were saying is, it's crazy how people are willing to share their cars, like through the Uber type programs. They're willing to share their homes through programs like VRBO. But yet we are starting to see more of a distrust for companies that have like corporation next to them, or anything that they would associate as being a bigger company, right? And so I think that because of some of that maybe lack of trust, or that trust that's starting to erode, that's potentially why we're starting to see some of these programs, right? Where consumers feel like they want to have more control and tell producers like, hey, this is how I would like my food to be raised. Mm-hmm. I am not saying that that's right or that's wrong. I'm just trying to share like a little bit of the background on what I've been learning in this packer world more recently. And so my point then is the one way that we can try to like bridge that gap and try to build that trust back is really through sharing that story and being transparent to the point of what Cara is talking about, and just sharing that's if this is what you have chosen, mm-hmm. there are going to be those trade-offs from a welfare standpoint, and it is going to cost us more to raise your food. And so then that needs to trickle down, and that story or message needs to be shared.
Yeah. When Wholestone Farms says, I got Prop 12 pork, and it goes to the marketplace, it doesn't really have to do any further explanation. Prop 12 is Prop 12. A grocer chain will buy it knowing full well what it is. And really to communicate that to the customers, it's not even in your range of possibility because you're providing the meat. You're not, or maybe it is. I don't know. That's the question for you is you talk about the transparency to the grocer, but do you think that's getting to the consumer in a meaningful way where they really understand, I'm paying more for this and it may not be better welfare actually, but it's what I'm asking for?
So a couple different things I think to that. One would be like the information that we're able to share on the label, right? And so believe it or not, there are consumers out there who are actually like scanning the QR code and doing a little bit more research on what does this mean. Mm-hmm. There's some consumer research out there that, will just reflect that there's an increase, a rise on people wanting to learn more and learning some of that information from the labels. So that's one way that we can get that information out. And then the second option is, I would say, Cara is an awesome example of this, but just like being more proactive on social media and trying to share some of that messaging too.
Yeah. Our listeners may or may not know this, but Cara has I don't know if it's 50 million or 1 billion followers on TikTok or something like that. She's
famous.
Yeah, she's TikTok famous. Cara, what's the name of your channel on TikTok? Is called like Pig Doc, or it's got some name. What is it?
Yeah, Cara Haden Pig Vet.
Pig Vet. Yep. Okay. It's funny because my daughters knew her and were just so impressed that I knew Cara. Like, you know her? I was like, yeah, I know her. But they thought I was pretty cool once they knew that I knew who you were, and we worked together. Okay. All right. That's interesting. And Cara, you may have an opinion on this, and Carissa probably does. You've done customer-facing or community-facing events in the past. Do you think that the regular public, the Joe Public person out there that's going to the grocery store buying pork, should I say, are we becoming more, less, or the same concerned about these things, sustainability, Prop 12, all these attribute type things, or with our current national economic situation, are we just more like, just give me good, cheap, safe food? How is that progressing? Are we getting more that direction or less that direction?
What I've seen, the consumer research would say, number one, it is somewhat regional, but number two, everywhere you go, regardless of the region, what's most important is quality and price. But then depending on like certain regions, there is going to be a little bit more awareness. I know, Cara, obviously you've interacted a lot with whether it's public or just through social media. So I'd be curious to know what your experience has been, even like through your TikTok followers. I think you've shared with me.
Yeah. Do you think that's growing or decreasing our concern with these things that we're talking about today as the regular public?
I think the concern is growing with the public. I think the public cares more and more about where their food comes from, but I don't think the public always has the expendable income to purchase the high attribute products that they want, if that makes sense. So they say this is really important to me and I really care about this, but when it comes down to at the grocery store, I think they typically, at least some of the consumer research that I've seen recently, is they buy what they can afford, even though they care deeply about some of these other attributes.
Yeah. No, that's voting with your actual dollars versus what you might respond to on a survey aren't always the same. Mm-hmm. Okay. Hey, we're running out of time, but I did want to get into a couple more brass tacks tactical type questions for both of you, and I'll start with Carissa. Carissa, I know about you through producers that I work with saying I had to talk to Carissa about collecting some information on sustainability, stuff that 5 years ago producers were never providing, but today for Wholestone you are. So can you talk a little bit about the type of information that's coming back from the farm level to you, to Wholestone, to help build a better attribute brand recognition and information that'll help consumers feel more confident? What does that look like? What are you asking for and why?
Yeah. So I referenced the 6 pillars earlier, and of those 6 pillars, then there's really 3 pillars that we ask the producers to be a little bit more involved in terms of getting data from them. One of the pillars would be the environmental pillar, which is where we're just basically asking them to share their raw data from their farm regarding whether it's energy, feed, water, everything that it takes to raise the pigs that they then are shipping to us. And then we're looking at, okay, what is our resource intensity across all the pigs that we're harvesting and that meat then that we're selling to our customer. So there's the environmental piece. On the animal welfare side, we do third-party animal welfare audits. And we also ask them to, just from like a foreign animal disease preparedness standpoint, to have their secure pork supply programs or enhanced biosecurity plans in place. And then we also, within the consumer choice bucket, we are working with our producers to align them with if there are attribute programs that they, think would fit for their operation, whether that's Prop 12. And then we also ask them to share their antibiotic data.
That is a little different than what other packers have asked for, at least as far as the volume of it. And I'm guessing it's got to be because the packers own, or our producers own the packer, that we want to go to the marketplace with a more transparent product, something that's better than what the other packers would be offering. And so we have the opportunity to get it from our packer owner or producer owners. And so it only fits that we would want to provide this and put together a better product.
Exactly. I think at this point, our intent is that by sharing some of that data, both the good and the bad, we are displaying transparency, and just in our effort to kind of overcome some of those biases, some of those hurdles, to really establish that trust with the consumer.
Yeah, and you use the word resource intensity. I mean, essentially it's carbon footprint, the things that more commonly get talked about in the public discourse, right?
Yeah, this gets a little bit into like the nerdy details, but what I would just emphasize is carbon footprint calculators take like different factors as you push it through this calculator. And some of those factors are based on some assumptions, right? And they might be more outdated assumptions. So that's why we're really trying to emphasize we are just sharing what we call resource intensities instead of pushing it at this time anyways, instead of pushing it through a carbon footprint calculator, just so we can just be transparent and just share like, here's the amount of electricity we're using to raise these pigs. Here's the amount of feed, water, those kinds of things.
And you even break it down to that level too.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All
Pretty
right.
cool.
Cara, similar question to you, but different. Cara, for Prop 12 in particular, you would help us respond to the auditor. So in this case, can you talk about what it looks like when a packer or when a Prop 12 auditor comes to a Prop 12 farm? What are they looking for? How does that visit go? You've been involved in some farms I work with in getting ready for that, and I know it was intense and it was stressful. Can you talk about what that feels like and looks like?
Yeah, sure. So the Prop 12 audit process starts with filling out an application. And so that application includes maps of the farm and then a whole bunch of other information. But typically our applications have been between like 24 and 28 pages to cover all of the information. Then the third party auditor calls and says, okay, we've reviewed your application. We think you're ready. Let's schedule the audit. Then the auditor actually physically comes to the farm. And the auditor is looking kind of primarily in three buckets. So the first is the facility bucket. So is your facility, do you have 24 square feet per sow? That's pretty simple. They just go around the barn and do a lot of measurements, counting of sows, and just confirming that your facility is appropriate. The second bucket is the documentation bucket. There is a lot of documentation that goes along with Prop 12. So you need to be documenting all the times that you are moving animals into non-compliant housing for lactation, into non-compliant housing because they're being treated or for veterinary reasons, or they're being moved into non-compliant housing for production purposes for short periods of time. You have to document all of those pieces. So the auditor is looking at all that documentation. And then the last thing that the auditor is looking at is traceability. So they want to make sure that if your sow farm is Prop 12 compliant, that you are somehow tracking those pigs until they get to the marketing facility. And so whether that be by an ear tag or a tattoo number or documentation or paperwork that goes with them through health papers, whatever that looks like. But those are the three buckets: facility, documentation, traceability. And then once they get done at the farm, you receive your official certificate. And then that is good for 1 year. So in a year, we get to restart the process at all of our farms.
It's only good for a year? It's be redone every year?
It is only good for a year. Yep.
Okay. So you kind of covered several things there. What area gets caught the most as far as being problematic? Like, oh, we really didn't have that shored up and up to snuff like we thought we did, or you're scrambling at the end to get that done right. What is the area that's the weakest area on a farm typically for doing well in one of these Prop 12 audits?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, your facility is either right or it isn't.
Okay.
Traceability you either have in place or you don't. It's the documentation that you're doing every single day. So every day that you put sows into free access, if you lock them up for 3 hours to breed, you have to record that. And then you have to keep that record for 2 years.
Hmm.
And so it is the constantly making sure that our teams are not missing any of that documentation. And then not only that we're getting it done in the barn, but then we're also getting it filed appropriately so we can keep it for 2 years. That is the piece that's really difficult.
Can that be electronic, or does that always have to be on paper?
It can be electronic. Yep. So there's some things that we track with our Porcitec mobile handhelds,
Okay.
and then some that we're doing on paper.
Okay. Yeah, having been to one farm that I have that is Prop 12, just the amount of paperwork is amazing. You know, what the farm manager now has to do, and he just kind of shrugs and grins and bears it, kind of a thing where there's just more paperwork than they already have to do, which just seems like a lot. But yeah, more paperwork. Hey, I really appreciate you both being here. You've both shared some interesting things I think the listeners will appreciate. You're both high capacity, high caliber individuals, so it's always fun to talk to you. And that you're both my resources too outside this podcast when I have questions. And I appreciate your help in those times. Hope our listeners enjoyed this. I'll wrap it up here now and just say thanks to you both. Appreciate you both spending time here, and good luck as you develop your programs.
Thanks, Spencer.
Yeah, thanks, Spencer.
Swine Time Podcast was created for the pork industry and individual pork producers around the country. Hosted by me, Dr. Spencer Wayne, with the Pipestone Veterinary Services. The podcast contains pork industry news, advancements in animal care, and how to enhance your productivity. Monthly podcasts are available on Spotify, Google Music, iTunes, Anchor, and on www.pipestone.com.